Okay, good morning, Zev. We're up to Avodah Zarah, Perek Gimel, Mishnah Dalid. An interesting and somewhat well-known Mishnah here, which has us look at a discussion between the well-known Rabbi Gamliel and one of the priests of Avodah Zarah. But as a word of introduction to what the Mishnah will be discussing, at the end of the last Mishnah, the Mishnah quoted the very well-known pasuk in Devorim Perek Yud Gimel, pasuk Yud Ches, namely, Shelo Yidbak Becha Meuma Min Acherem. That no part of the bank property may cling to your hand. No part of Avodah Zarah may ever cling to your hand. And that is the pasuk which is the source for the issue of having any benefit from an idol, from an Avodah Zarah. Now that pasuk also forbids having hanoah benefiting from any of the accessories of the Avodah Zarah, such as something that is made to honor or to decorate a given idol, a given Avodah Zarah. So now this Mishnah is going to present us a discussion between Rabbi Gamliel and a priest of Avodah Zarah, where Rabbi Gamliel clarifies whether this Isur Hanoah, the Isur Hanoah of Avodah Zarah, that one cannot derive any benefit even from an accessory to an Avodah Zarah, not the idol itself, but an accessory to the idol, whether this also applies to a bathhouse. And this is a well-known discussion between Rabbi Gamliel and the priest of the Avodah Zarah. Says the Mishnah, Shaul Puklus ben Flusfus es Rabbi Gamliel be'Akko. Puklus, who was the son of Philosophus, sounds like a philosopher, presented a question to Rabbi Gamliel when Rabbi Gamliel was in Akko. And there Rabbi Gamliel hoyorochetz b'merchatz shel Aphrodite. Rabbi Gamliel was bathing in the bathhouse of Aphrodite. There was a statue there in this bathhouse. There was a statue there. There was an idol there of the idol Aphrodite, which Meforshim explained represented the planet Venus. Amaloi, Sapuklu said Rabbi Gamliel, Kosu b'seraschem, it says in your Torah, in this pasuk that we just quoted, V'lo yidbak b'yotchem u'ma min acherem, that no part of the bank property may cling to your hand, which teaches that a Jew may not derive any benefit from an item of idolatry, not only from the idol itself, but from an item of idolatry. So if that's the case, he asked Rabbi Gamliel, why then are you bathing in the bathhouse of Aphrodite? So first Rabbi Gamliel told him that I'm not going to discuss Torah with you in the bathhouse. Amar loy, Rabbi Gamliel said to him, Ein meshivin b'merchatz. We may not answer questions about Torah matters in a bathhouse where people are undressed. Now, the Meforshim explain here that obviously Rabbi Gamliel was already in the dressing room when he said this. Were he to have asked him this in the bathhouse itself, in the actual bathing area, then even saying that we may not discuss Torah matters is not allowed. Because even thinking Divrei Torah in a bathhouse is not allowed. It's not allowed when one is not dressed. So he said to him, hold up, I can't answer you here. But when Rabbi Gamliel left the bathhouse, he told Proklus, Ani loy basi b'gvula. My first answer is, Ani loy basi b'gvula. First of all, I want to inform you that I did not enter into Aphrodite's area. He ba bigvuli. Aphrodite entered my area. That is to say, that the bathhouse was made for public use before this statue of Aphrodite was placed here. The idol was later put there, and that cannot rob the public of its right to use the bathhouse. As a rule, a person's idol cannot prohibit another person's property. Explains the Meiri. Excuse me. So that's the first thing he said. He ba bigvuli, ani lo ibasa bigvula, he bas bigvuli. The bathhouse was here, first and foremost, for everybody's use. Then the fact that they placed this there, so it came into the bathhouse, but the bathhouse remains a bathhouse. And secondly, he said to him, Ein oimrim. Secondly, he said, Ein oimrim nase merchat la'Aphrodite noi. We don't say that the bathhouse beautifies Aphrodite, ela oimrim, but rather we say, Nase Aphrodite noi lemerchat. Aphrodite beautifies the bathhouse. In other words, since the idol is adorning the bathhouse and not the other way around, it's permissible to use the bathhouse. Meaning that a bathhouse is never used to beautify or decorate something else. Clearly then, the idol was put there to decorate the bathhouse, and it becomes secondary to the bathhouse rather than the other way around. And therefore, it is permitted to use the bathhouse. The Rabbi Bartanura says it very well. Look inside. He bos bigvuli, she'amerchatz kodem lo. The merchatz was here first. V'amerchatz naase lekol ha'balirchatz, it's for everybody's use. And secondly, another answer, v'oi tshuva acheres, ein oimrim naase merchatz noi la'Aphrodite. The merchatz lav davar shel noi. A merchatz is not a davar shel noi. A merchatz is a bathhouse for everybody's use. But the fact that this idol was brought here, ela naase Aphrodite noi la'merchatz. She'Aphrodite mishamesh b'merchatz. Aphrodite came to inside the merchatz, and therefore, that's the key. V'hi v'hu tofel. The Aphrodite is tofel, and the bathhouse is iko. The Aphrodite becomes secondary to the bathhouse. Tofel and iko. An interesting use of tofel and iko. Continues the Mishnah Devar Acher. Another reason, says Rabbi Gamliel, to proclose, even if you were given a lot of money. Even if you were given a lot of money, you wouldn't come into your idol while you're undressed, or balkeri, or umashtim befaneh, or urinate in front of it. V'zu oimedes al pi abiv. Yet this statue of Aphrodite, which you're asking me about, where is it located? It stands at the opening of the waist channel. V'chol ha'am mashtinin lefaneh, and everyone urinates in front of it. Is the riber lo nemar ela eloheihem? When the Torah speaks about idols, it says, "You shall utterly destroy Eloheihem, their gods." The pasuk in Dvarim, Yud Beis, pasuk Beis. This implies, why does it say Eloheihem specifically to teach me an important halacha? That this implies that only that which is treated as a god is forbidden to have benefit from. But that which is not treated as a god and is instead subject to disrespect, the urinate in front of it, mutar is permitted for benefit because it is not considered an idol. Now we'll see in Perik Dalid, Mishnah Hey, that if an idolater performs certain destructive acts to his idol, then al pi halacha, he himself removes the prohibited status of the Avodah Zarah. It becomes mutar be'ano. Merely treating an idol disrespectfully, however, does not change its status as an idol. For while he may be angry with it now, he will later return to worship it, the Gemara says. Now, in our case, however, where the idol was put into a bathhouse, it was constantly treated with disrespect. It was constantly treated with disrespect. And in such a case, even if it was originally worshipped as an idol, it is no longer forbidden. And that's what he tells him when he gives him the last argument about mashtin befonea, etc., etc. Only that which is Elohim is also, but that which is not noyeg mishum Eloha is mutar. And the next Mishnah is also a very well-known Mishnah, a very important Mishnah in terms of a fundamental halacha of Avodah Zarah. Many of the Avodah Zarah throughout the centuries would worship natural features of the earth. They would worship mountains, b'chadoime. So the Mishnah, natural phenomena, part of Ma'aseh Bereshis. The mountain was always there, mibriyas ha'olam. So now the Mishnah discusses the halacha of natural objects that are attached to the ground, that were always there, mishas Ma'aseh Bereshis, that were worshipped by idolaters. And this is the well-known Mishnah I'm referring to. Agoyim ha'oivdim esehorim ve'es ha'gvois, Mishnah Hey. Agoyim ha'oivdim esehorim ve'es ha'gvois. If non-Jews worship mountains and hills, heorim ve'ha'gvois, mountains and hills, hein mutorim, those mountains and hills do not become also behano. Those mountains and hills are permitted for benefit. For example, it's permitted to plant in those mountains. It's permitted to take stones from those mountains and use them. But umashe alehem asurin. However, whatever is on them, whatever the Avodah Zarah put on the mountains, gold and silver, overlays on hills and mountains and pieces around, decorative, those are asurim. Those are asurim. Because the Pasuk says, Sheneema, the Pasuk says in Devorim Perek Zayin, Pasuk Chafhei, Lo yisachmoit kesef vezohav aleim velakachta. The carved images of their gods you shall burn in the fire. You shall not desire and take the silver and gold that is on them. This teaches that such ornaments are also behano, because the word says aleihem, on them. And the pasuk therefore teaches that the ornaments of an idol on any worshipped object, even if the object itself is not also, such as the hills and the mountains, attached to the ground, cannot be removed, but whatever is halayim is also. Comes along Rabbi Yossi Aglili and explains why mountains and hills are not also, based on the pasuk where the Torah tells us to destroy items of Avodah Zarah. Rabbi Yossi Aglili says that the pasuk in Devorim Yud Beis, pasuk Beis, says, I'll say it in English first. You shall utterly destroy all the places where the nations that you shall possess worship their gods, on the high mountains and on the hills, and under every leafy tree. That's the pasuk. the mocha of the Isur. Says Rabbi Yosef, let me explain the pasuk to you. The pasuk, let me repeat the pasuk in its original. Abe ta'abdu niskola mekoimus, asher ovdu shamagoyim, asher atem yoshim oisam es Eloheihem, alehorim aromim, ve'alagvois, and take note of this last phrase, ve'sachas kol eitz ra'anon. So now Rabbi Yosef clearly explains the pieces of this pasuk. Eloheihem alehorim, they're gods on the mountains, implies, but the worshipped mountains themselves are not considered their gods. The mountains are mountains. They're there, as I said earlier, Mishas Maisa Bereshis. They're part of the world that God created. It can't be changed in any way, shape, or form by anyone. The mountain is the mountain, from beginning to the end of the world. So Eloheihem Alahorim, the gods that they placed on the mountains, that's also, but the worship mountains themselves are not considered their gods. Weiter, Eloheihem alagvois. Similarly, the continuation of the pasuk can be understood as reading, their gods are on the hills, which implies, but their hills can't become gods. The worshipped hills cannot be considered under any circumstances their gods. So the pasuk therefore teaches that mountains and hills, as well as similar items that are attached to the ground, do not become also bano, even if they're worshipped as an idol. Even if they're worshipped as an idol. The Chachomim expound the pasuk as if it were connected to the second half. It says, Eloheihem aleorim. All right, I'm pointing that out because the pasuk reads, so take note of this, es Eloheihem. But the Chachomim, Chazal explain, Eloheihem aleorim. Their gods are on the mountains. Eloheihem alagvois. If they place idols on the mountains, idols on the hills, they become also. But the Horim and the Gvos themselves cannot, under any circumstances, become also Ba'ano, cannot become Avodah Zarah. Now, it would seem to follow that we should explain the final words of the pasuk, which I pointed out to you, Zev. The final words of the pasuk, V'sachas kol eitz ra'anon. V'sachas kol eitz ra'anon. And under every leafy tree, we should explain it in the same way. That is, that it comes to teach us that only the gods under the trees are forbidden. V'sachas kol eitz ra'anon. An idol placed under the tree should become also. But worship trees themselves should not be also. Oh, worship trees themselves should not be also? But we all know that there's a halacha of an Asherah. There is a halacha of Asherah. The Torah forbids deriving any hana from any kind of tree, from any type of tree that has been worshipped. And the Torah tells us specifically, Va'ashereim in Devorim Perek Zayin Posuk Hey. Devorim Perek Zayin Posuk Hey. The Torah tells us there specifically, Va'ashereim Tegadeyun. The Asherah, the eight Asherah, which means an eight that was worshipped as an Avodah Zarah, Tegadeyun. You have to cut it down. How could that be? How could that be? We just said, Eloheihem Elohorim, Ve'Elohorim Eloheihem. Eloheihem Elagvois, Ve'Agvois Eloheihem. And then the pasuk says at the end, "V'sachas kol eitz ra'anon." So the same should be true about the tree. Frag the Mishnah mipnei ma Asherah asura. So why is an Asherah a tree of idolatry? Also, as the pasuk says, that their Asherah you shall cut down. V'ashereim tegadeyun. What's the answer? The answer is that the mountain and the hill was there forever, from Sheshes Yemei Bereshis. But the tree you planted, the tree man has a part in. Because a tree comes about through a person's personal involvement. The person plants it. And the halacha is, the klal godol is, that v'kol sheyesh batfisas yidei odam also. Whatever comes about through man's personal involvement is also if it is worshipped. Mountain and hills came about without anyone's involvement, only the Rebbeinu Shalom's involvement. They were there Misheshis Yemei Bereshis. And therefore, if they're worshipped, it's permitted to derive benefit from them. But a tree in Asherah was planted, came about through man's personal involvement. Trees are different from mountains. Mountains were formed by God, while trees come forth by man planting them. And the Mishnah finishes by telling us that Rabbi Yossi Aglili explained why trees are different from mountains and hills, but he did not explain what the Torah is actually teaching with the words Vesachas kol eitz ra'anon. What does Vesachas kol eitz ra'anon then teach us? We already know that the Asherah is also because it's man's involvement. It's Tfisas Yedei Odom. So what does Vesachas kol eitz ra'anon teach us then? So another Tana comes to explain by taking a somewhat different approach to the entire matter. Amar Rabbi Akiva, Ani oivin ve'odon lefanecha. I will explain the matter and argue the logic before you. Ani oivin ve'odon lefanecha. I'll explain the matter and argue the logic before you. A nice expression. Kol mokum shata moitze hal gavoya. The Pasuk is telling us that when Jews enter Eretz Yisrael, wherever you find a tall mountain, Vegiva Nisa, and you find elevated hills, Ve'etz Ra'anon, or a leafy tree, says Rabbi Akiva, Da sheyesham Avodah Zarah. You better know, you ought to know, that there is an idol around there someplace. And therefore, you have to seek out the idol and destroy it. Let's explain it a little bit better. Just like Rabbi Yossi Aglili, Rabbi Akiva maintains that mountains and hills do not become prohibited if they were worshipped as idols, while trees do. However, he explains that this pasuk is not directly teaching these laws, but rather it is guiding the Jew to the idols hidden by the Knaanim. Nevertheless, from the fact that the pasuk singles out the idols on the mountains and hills and says nothing about destroying the worshipped mountains and hills themselves, we can conclude that they are not also. Trees, however, which the Torah elsewhere does tell us to destroy, Vashereim tegadeyun, they are also. The Gemara expounds on this, that the Tanakama is choilek Rabbi Yossi Aglili and Rabbi Akiva, the Tanakama's opinion, the pasuk does exclude trees from becoming asur if worshipped, but only if the trees were not planted with the intent of worshiping them. The pasuk V'ashereim tegadeyun that requires that we destroy the Asherah trees is referring specifically to those trees that were originally planted with the intent to be worshipped. And that substantiates the concept of kol sheyesh batfisas yedei odam is also okay.